Thank you. First, I'd like to thank HDF for having me here today among such great panelists. It's a very important conversation that means a lot to me. Up until November, this past November, I have been a classroom teacher in Bridgeport since 2006. Prior to working in Bridgeport, I taught at Fairfield Ward High School. And my mentor teacher told me, gosh, you should really work in Bridgeport. You are so passionate in your co-taught classes and attending all these events. I used to work in Bridgeport, and you would do really, really well. These students and you would be such a team. So I thought to myself, hey, I'm early in my career. I finished my undergrad when I was 20 years old. I need to see what she's talking about. So I head over to HR in Bridgeport, and I said, where do teachers not want to teach? And they identified a particular school on the east end of Bridgeport, and I said, I would love to interview for an English position in the middle school. So I went over and I met my first Bridgeport principal, Gladys Walker-Jones, and she hired me. And through my work in Bridgeport, I began to realize all the different aspects of education that affect student outcomes that I really was not aware of prior to my work in Bridgeport. In Fairfield, I could go into a book room and get a class set of books delivered to my room where I could explore the books with my students, we could have debates, and then when time, something else sparked their interest, I could go back to the book room, return that class set, and pick up a fresh new set of books. And I didn't even understand what an advantage that was, as both an educator and as a student. When I began teaching my students in middle school, I did not have class sets of books. I didn't even have an anthology when I was first hired. I had books donated from a church in Darien, and when I brought them into my classroom, when I tell you the eruption that took place, you would have thought I had money sprinkled all over the tables. They ripped through these boxes of books. They were so excited. And this was my first experience teaching students that I realized had an incredible amount of opportunity gaps. Adults were really creating these disadvantages. This was also my first experience with a student where housing instability directly impacted their performance in school. Not only academically, but also in terms of their attendance rate, which sent truancy officers to this family's home at the time, where they actually wasn't their home, it was where they were staying at the time. DCF became involved because of the truancy aspect, housing conditions. They were living with 2 other families in this particular location. A student who never missed a day of school began to be out 2-3 times a week. I would make copies of materials, of books that I had donated because they couldn't go home or then nobody would have access to them. I would make copies with paper that I bought from Staples because we lacked supplies. Still, the students' grades slowly slipped. I began going over this child's house on Saturdays to tutor him. And finally, one day he just broke down and he's like, I don't know how to be an adult. And he shouldn't have to. So 5 years ago, this SEL journey began in Bridgeport. And it began with a partnership between Bridgeport Public Schools and the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, along with Yale School of Medicine's Consultation Center and an incredible partner, the Tauk Family Foundation. Tauk also brought a number of other private funders and organizations along to support this effort. And it started as a pilot program in one of our Bridgeport schools. This particular program has lasted through 3 different superintendents. And this first pilot school was a 1-year endeavor. And after that first year, our new superintendent, who had experience with the outcomes of the ruler approach, said, no, one school doesn't deserve this program. All of our children and our families deserve and need this program. All of our educators need to learn these skills so they could better interact with our students and our families. And as a classroom teacher, I personally have been implementing aspects of the ruler approach for the past 3 years. And I can't even describe for you the incredible changes I've seen with my students, with my families of my students, the community members, and the teaching staff. We have a lot of struggles going on in our Bridgeport Public Schools, and you could just see the spark inside of educators where our SEL journey really morphed into a movement. And the ruler approach teaches educators, students, families, community members how to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate their emotions.